Welcome one, welcome all, welcome to another exciting episode of Tales of Citizens right here in the Sound Strategy Network. I am Bridger, and I welcome you here to episode number 22 where we're talking about, well, a whole bunch of different things. Cassandra's Tears was the homework to read, and today we're going to be talking about that, but we're also going to be talking about the rental equipment credits and the new mining information that we saw recently unveiled by Robert Space Industries. There's a lot of cool stuff to talk about. Stick around. We're glad to have you. All right, also joining me, as always, I have my friend Gray here. Welcome, sir.
Hey, Bridger, how's it going?
Also from Team Legacy, and joining us all the way from down under, traveling through several dozen time zones, we have Tim Young. Welcome, sir.
Got to be back.
So what new items in the astrophysics world are happening?
I mean, heaps of stuff. We've had the recent plumes on Mars debacle. I don't know if you guys have caught that one.
Debacle?
There's a...
Was it as bad
Well,
as
yeah.
we forgot to transfer it from meters to feet debacle?
No, this is a good one.
Actually
because,
exciting.
Oh, a good
this
debacle.
is
I didn't
the
know that
whole-
was possible.
Oh, totally. No, we have good debacles all the time. No, the giant plumes of dust and cloud, hundreds of kilometers up in the atmosphere where they really shouldn't be. First started by amateur astronomers, and then NASA turned all their big telescopes towards it as well, and went, huh, look at that. Well, that ruins everything.
All right, I'm trying to find some pictures of these plumes. Let's see if Google will provide us with
Mars plume in Google image search will get it for you.
We got several.
Any phrase in astronomy that ends with "this ruins everything" is awesome because you know you
it's
found
usually
something
pretty
interesting.
good.
We've had this perfect theory. Why did you have to go and ruin it? That appears to be like the major thing. So they're trying to figure out what exactly that is. Is it like gas
Because
being
Mars
released from
has
underground?
Mars has such a tenuous atmosphere. It's much, much thinner than our own, which is something that Star Citizen picks up on and tries to sort of combat with the terraforming idea. So the height of the clouds you expect to see on Mars are much, much lower, if at all, sort of thing. I mean, the clouds there are fairly wispy to begin with. And this one is like 120, 130 kilometers high. It's high enough that you can look at the limb of the planet and see it as a bump coming over the edge.
Right.
So clouds shouldn't physically exist there, and the fact that they are there suggests that there's some convection mechanism we don't know about, or maybe they're like ultralight particles, or they can, I don't know, they're picking up photon pressure. We have no idea. But either way, it's awesome.
It is. Anything that makes scientists go, huh, that's not right, is always awesome. That is how you categorize it.
It's a wonderful
Totally.
thing.
That's pretty much how every important discovery started. Huh, that's not right. I'm pretty sure. Or Eureka,
That's
one or the
falling
other.
upwards.
So, what are you up to recently, Gray? What have you? This is a small segment we start at the beginning of every show. We sort of say what's going on with each of the players on our little show here. Specifically, we don't have much to do in the games universe yet. We have a little bit of Arena Commander. Have you been playing any Arena Commander recently, Gray? They just released the 103 patch.
I have a bit, yeah. I've actually been really enjoying my time in my 350R. It does have the classic, you start the first time when you go into a group battle with your helmet on backwards, so you eject. And then you come out of that, and you don't have working thrusters, so you eject. This happens, quick simultaneous order, because you can tell there's a problem. First you can't see, and then you can't move. And then you come back in the third time, and everything works great. And you don't die, and you move really fast, and you fire Rattler missiles at people, and they explode. And it's amazing.
Now that's a really odd bug. So you're saying consistently when you start, you have this problem
Yes.
and you die, and then that problem is fixed, but a new problem is there, and then you die, and then it works?
Almost every time. You just eject once to get rid of the helmet being gone, and then you eject a second time to get rid of the thruster problem, and then you're set. And yes,
Excellent.
for anyone who's asking, I have deleted my user folder many, many times.
Yeah.
I delete it every morning. It's a ritual for me now.
Right?
And there was a post on Reddit. You only have to delete one part of the user folder now. You don't have to delete it
Yeah.
all.
Well,
So that's kind of
to
kinda
fix
handy.
specific problems. Yeah. I'll see if I can find that post
The
and put it in the
inventory
show notes
XML
later.
file.
Yeah, inventory something.xml, user_inventory, something to that effect.
Yeah,
It's
something
in
like
the
that.
user
You get to
folder.
keep that.
That is
the user
specifically
inventory is good.
That one specifically fixes any problems that have to do with loadout issues,
Yeah.
as I understand it. So,
Flight issues are a whole different can of worms.
speaking of Arena Commander, our own Vin from Team Legacy has put together a pretty cool video that is available. I'll have the link to this in the show notes as well. This is on YouTube, showing off some of the tactics that our organization has been utilizing recently, specifically wingman tactics. So I can.
You should link it over in chat for anybody who can take a look, but it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, especially the communication side of things.
Oh yeah, what Vin is doing is incredible. Joys of working with a Navy pilot.
The advantages, yeah.
Support.
Been zooming, cleared, engage.
What they're
But if you're
doing
looking to
there,
show somebody, if you're looking to show somebody what coordinated current combat in Star Citizen can look like, long survival times, good focused fire, incredibly tight maneuvers, this is a great way to show somebody what prolonged combat can look like in this game.
yeah,
Unless you're one of the people that Vin is
specifically
shooting at, in which case
one of
they
the
got
things-
about 30 seconds to live.
Yeah, one of the things that you'll see them do here is what he just did there is he selected his wingman and then he basically tagged it onto the screen. What's the pinned it
It's
on the
the
screen
pin.
there as a target, so that he's always able to see his teammate more clearly in the radar and on the actual field of view, the HUD as well. It makes it much easier to keep track of where your teammate is, so you can stay on their 6 and cover them and things like that. So it's pretty cool. Definitely check that out. There is a link in the show notes. You can also search for Remember, You Never Fly Alone on YouTube. You'll probably catch it. It's White Snake on YouTube. So anyway, show notes are on the talesofcitizens.com website, or you can also check the bottom description of this if you're watching it on YouTube, or the description if you're watching this / listening to it on the audio feed. Okay, anyway.
If you enjoy Maniacal Ginger's tactics videos, you'll enjoy this too.
Sure. What?
Come on, Maniacal Ginger, you've seen this stuff.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
I
a
know.
handle.
I actually read-
I thought you meant
Yeah.
in general, gingers who are maniacal. Like there's a club that they all get together and have their own set of YouTube channels. Okay, so
I'm sure there is, but you can't have a soul to join, so.
unfortunately. So yeah, definitely check that out. It's very cool. And the other thing that I have been doing recently is waiting for Homeworld Remastered, because holy...
Oh my god, yes.
Wow. This looks amazing. It's amazing how this... Look at this! This is amazing. It's not actually very high res in Steam, so it's not that great.
You
but
can be a space racist in HD.
That's right. Space supremacist, they call it, actually. Thank you very much.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
But, yeah,
Homeworld
the,
games to me were hugely formative in my my whole sort of love of the space genre, especially in gaming. And to follow the work that Gearbox has been putting into that is just absolutely phenomenal. I mean, they have, in terms of the remake attitude, they have it down pat, absolutely perfect. They've got real focus on maintaining the original game and not trying to change it, just trying to bring it up to date and make it playable again. So
Yeah,
massively
it's
inspired by
incredible
that.
how much effort they've put into this. It looks like every single texture has gotten full HD rework, not just like, oh, we'll take the original textures that were that were downscaled in the original game and use those. Like this looks like they went back and made it like 4K.
You have to figure
Yeah,
there are some
so-
artists who must have been incredibly enthusiastic about this game growing up. I mean, as you guys noted, this is really formative in a lot of people's early sci-fi experience. Given the opportunity, I'd imagine there were people who jump at it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The crazy thing is though that a lot of the art in this game was actually it wasn't texture based, it was vertex shading. And
Yep.
that had never really been done up until that point. And even then hadn't been done really since then because it's ridiculously difficult to do. And to then turn vertex shading and turn it into something that looks like a canvas oil painting, I mean that's really phenomenal.
Yes, I love those. It was Relic that did the original games, but I believe they also, who else used that same style? Guild Wars started to use that same style, didn't they? Guild Wars 2 in like
The
some
oil
of the
painting
cinematics. But they were like they would have them move in front of each other. You know, it like they were two like almost like South Park style like paper cutouts. but they were
Guild
3D.
Wars 1
It was-
played a bit of that too, if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken.
It was a really cool style. I liked it.
It's a great artistic style. If you're going for something that's real stylized, pretty, but not necessarily that smooth, classic cinematic view that you get with everybody else, it's beautiful to go with.
Yeah, so we've got
Yeah.
that coming up, and then we've also got the expansion for EU4, which allows you to make custom nations and then also flood the world with custom nations. So you can have like a completely randomized world where France is for some reason in the Middle East, and oh man, if I stop making shows, it's because that happened. You know what I'm saying?
We'll find you on TeamSpeak just babbling
Bridger,
to
I don't
yourself
know what
alone
you're
in a
saying at
channel.
all.
The big blue blob. The big blue blob. Oh, God. It's taking over India. All right. So let's move on to actual Star Citizen related items here because nobody came here to listen to me talk about U4, probably. So
There's one or two people who just tuned out.
yeah, there's one or two people. So now, the new homework for next time is The Lost Generation. This is another Star Citizen show, sorry, not show, but story set on the Robert Space Industries website. So let me show this here. If you want to find these cool things, you click on Comlink and Spectrum Dispatch right here on the Robert Space Industries website. You can see there are actually quite a lot of series. We already looked at Cassandra's Tears and Tales of Kid Crimson. The Lost Generation is another great one. A Human Perspective, A Separate Law, a Dateline, Cessin, The First Run, Orbital, Supermax. These are all stories that take place inside the Star Citizen universe. And as a result...
all stories I enjoyed more than Cassandra's Tears.
Yeah, unfortunately today we're looking at the weakest of the stories, I think. But we'll get to that in a second. First, let's talk about rental equipment credits in a segment we're going to be calling Addressing Concerns, because we had to do it before, and apparently we have to keep doing it every time CIG opens their mouth. Gray, I'm a little worried that we're just going to sound like fanboys too often here.
Yeah. So here's the problem. People who were most concerned, and I use those scare quotes appropriately here, about REC, were in fact often idiots.
Oh, jeez. No diplomacy.
I don't feel that it's required in this case, because regardless of what I say, there will be somebody who will find us and will post a giant pile of wargarble. And you know what? I don't care to read it again. Going through this REC post, the biggest problem that we're running into is that people are treating this topic as if it's some sort of freemium grind. They're acting like, instead of them saying, well, if you test the ship that you own, which is in fact the ship that you will be starting with in the persistent universe, that you will be flying, that they need to be bug-free, if you properly test that ship, they will give you rental credits to test whatever the hell you want, but only if you're actually contributing to the process. What people seem to have a problem with, and where we're finding all of these topics floating around, is the fact that they are quote-unquote required to play, which is the first place my hand hits my forehead, in order to test a different weapon which they don't own, which they won't be starting with, because they feel somehow that that weapon is pay to win. Well, despite the lack of paying, the lack of winning, and the fact that they will not have these weapons to start in the persistent universe anyway.
Yeah,
everything about this gives me a migraine.
Okay, that's your Gray rant for the week right there. It's a lot slower and quieter than mine, but it may be stronger. It's a lot
slower and more deliberate.
Yes. So, my initial thought upon reading that there was a lot of people angry about this was confusion. But like I said before, I don't want to sound like we're a mouthpiece for Cloud Imperium games. Like, we just happen to agree with them on a lot of things. But let's get this out in the air. once we get towards the actual game and we are actually seeing the actual game mechanics and we're seeing the actual things that you can and can't buy in the store, that is where I start getting actually concerned about potential issues. The fact that somebody's getting concerned right now when we're so far away and there's so much time to make changes and we're using a temporary thing on top of a temporary thing, it's just so not worth getting worked up over. I am so ready to critique the hell out of CIG and make my own 90,000 word posts about such things once we get closer to the point where they're going to start being solidified. But so far I haven't been super worried. Now, I'll just for the record, to make it so that it's not clear that I'm like the lapdog here, because I think that's kind of what we look like sometimes when we come on here and tell all these people that they're idiots for being worried about things. I do have concerns. I just don't hold them to be important yet. And I understand people are going to say, oh, well, now is the time you have to make your thing. But you know what? Most of the concerns people have now are based on assumptions that CIG is making something horrible. I can't be sure.
The
right
perfect
now.
analogy here is that if someone leaves a backpack on a train, you can be concerned. You can't be concerned every time you see someone wearing a backpack.
Ah, that's a good analogy. So let me put this out there right now. I mean, I am a little bit concerned about the pay-to-win aspect of the game, in that if you want to be a competitive force in the organization game when it comes into the universe, you're going to have all your members paying, $5 a week to get credits to buy really good ammo or something like that. That is a concern. I don't want that to happen.
I don't think that's going to be an issue at all, because...
Well, maybe not. But here's the thing. They are going to allow people to buy a certain amount of UEC credits per day, which is a way of trying to control the black gold market, right? Which is a weird way of putting it,
And I mean, it's either per day or per week or whatever. They were
something
saying.
that,
There's a
whatever
cap.
it winds up being. They're trying to slightly control that gold market, but I'm unsure of
in a lot of ways,
problems that
what you're
will
looking
arise.
at here is very similar to the Guild Wars 2 gem system. You have a currency that people can buy to get a small advantage because, I mean, they're capping it. Guild Wars 2 didn't. Guild Wars 2 just made it prohibitive if you traded a bunch in.
You're right, but I would argue, and
it's an advantage.
Everything
depends. It is a small advantage.
Everything depends on how their ship balance works out. If the bigger ships are just always better, and there's no reason to have a freelancer when you can have a constellation, there's no reason to have a constellation when you can have a javelin. Like, if that's the progression, then it's going to be horrible, and all the rich people are going to be able to rule the world. But if, as I suspect, there is going to be a role in larger combats for the smaller ships, and that you're going to want your capital ships escorted by cruisers and your cruisers protected by destroyers and your destroyers flanked by frigates, etc. If they have that kind of system built in, then I'm less worried.
And a purpose for fighters.
And a purpose for fighters, obviously, yeah.
As long as there's a purpose for fighters, they have an ability to scale upward, and that helps a lot.
Big ships shouldn't be able to take on small ships by themselves. They should need a fighter screen or flak frigate type thing. I mean, we've seen many space games with this. But let's address the actual things that people have a problem with in REC. No more than like 3 sentences, because none of these need more than 3 sentences to deal with. Tim, the first one I've got on here, this assertion says that the rental equipment credits indicate that the game will be following a freemium model, once we get to release. They don't care about this particular issue because it's alpha, but they're worried that this is an indication of what they plan to do in the persistent universe. Your response?
No.
Short and sweet.
I don't understand how you can possibly think that. I mean, first of all, the freemium model...
Listen, you just have to be really ridiculously pessimistic.
First of all, the freemium model implies that you have to pay to get the things, but the whole point of the RSC is that you don't. You keep playing to unlock the thing. I don't get it. In fact, it's the opposite, because the freemium model quite often locks you out from playing unless you pay. If you look at things like your Candy Crush Saga or your whatever that stupid War of the Tribes.
Clash of Clans, yeah.
Clash of Clans. I have friends who've been playing that quite religiously. But the games that actually halt you from playing, unless you spend some money to unlock another turn, that is a freemium model. This is the opposite of that. This is you can play all the time, and the more that you do play, the more things that you can have. I don't get it.
Okay, so that's one. Let's move on. Gray, requiring ranked matches punishes people who enjoy a PvE experience.
That would be really valid if not for the fact they already mentioned that there would be community goals like killing a bunch of Vandal ships in PvE.
Or the fact that Colt Vandal Swarm was counted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they're still working on making sure there aren't too many exploits, but the idea of like co-op Vandal Swarm being a community goal which gives everybody all this REC, they basically just showed that they didn't bother reading anything.
Yeah.
Or that they want to be able to get the maximum amount of REC.
It was a little bit further down, but it is definitely on there.
Read the whole article.
Yeah.
I have to say this to my students all the time. When you're reading the question, you can't just read your favorite words. You have to read all the words. Every single word is there for a reason.
If somebody doesn't want a PvP at all, ever, and they are complaining that they can't test every weapon as quickly as people who PvP all the time and help CIG test, yes, that's correct. If you are trying to say that you are not willing to help test these things because that's just not something I do, then why should they reward you for not doing those things? They're going to reward you for the things you do.
Yes.
Which in this case is PvE co-op Vandal Swarm.
So here's my next piece here, and this kind of plays into the previous one. Because it's rewarded based on score and performance, everyone will use the flavor of the month setup and abuse imbalances. To which I say, excellent. That is the point of a test. The whole purpose is to encourage everyone in the community to find and abuse the imbalances in the game, because that will make them so much more obvious. If everybody's using Omninsky 6s, then that shows, hey, we've crowdsourced an opinion from this community that say they've all looked at the data and they all decided that Omninsky 6s are really good. Maybe we should take a look at Omninsky 6s. That's a very good thing in a testing environment. I can completely agree that what you're looking at here are very perverse incentives for a released game, but not necessarily for a game in which you want to test.
And I also want to take a quick moment and reflect back on something you'd talked about, Bridger, the idea of the noob tube.
Mm-hmm.
Is the Omninsky 6 a noob tube? Or is it actually overpowered? That's what they need to actually determine.
There's
and having a lot of
subtlety.
people testing that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, having people get a lot of that data is exactly what they need. Now, I don't want to be too inflammatory, but there is a post on the forums that attempts to rank every weapon by a perfunctory rate. That the person said, well, I'm going to fire using a script for, I think it's 3 minutes or something like that, 60 seconds, I don't know what it is. And he averages out the DPS, and then he multiplies it by a value that he made up. That's not testing. That's not scientific. That's saying, I believe this weapon to be good, so I am going to multiply my test values, which may or may not be totally valid for actual combat, by 1.6.
Because Gray, this one goes through shield, so I'm going to give it an extra bit of boost. And this one doesn't, so it gets a detriment. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of subjective stuff in there too, but the proof is in the pudding. If you look at the top 10 people on the leaderboard and they're all using Omninsky 6s or they're all using Talon missiles or what have you,
their time to kill.
Yeah.
I mean, they can look at these matches and say, what's this person's time to kill? What's actually going on here?
What's the percent win rate on Hornets versus Auroras versus 300 Eyes? I mean, you can gather a lot of data, and that data is only available if people can try multiple things but don't all have access to everything, because that's the alternative here, right? The alternative is give everybody access to everything for the testing. Well, yes, but then everybody's going to say, well, I'm definitely going to use my, the Super Hornet all the time. no
Unless you're in
questions asked.
test and you're flying an Aurora all the time.
Exactly.
I mean,
then, well, yes, that's the obvious exception. So, I don't know. All right, Tim, here's another one. The system doesn't reward people who are testing with friends in custom matches.
So,
That doesn't mean you can't go into custom matches and test things, right? We're going to go to Tim for... Now we go live for Tim for our one-word response. Tim?
and now to the weather report with Tim. It's gonna rain!
wet,
Exactly.
hot,
Thank you. Okay, so...
really
Now,
hot.
I don't... As easy as it is and as fun as it is to just say, these people are idiots. It's not, because obviously... Remember, love and hate are two sides of the same coin. Just when people come out and they bash these kinds of decisions, it's because they care about this game. They're invested in it. They want it to succeed. They just are worried about how it will turn out. Maybe it's going to turn out different from their vision, and that's why. So let's not come out and just say they're all idiots. Nobody's the villain in their own story, right? So there are some things to think about here. The problem is that, yes, I can see how a lot of people would be concerned because you can't have, because they don't like playing in, the PvP thing, right? There's going to be some things in this game that you don't have to worry about that. But to them, I say, this is a testing environment, and the most important thing to nail is game balance in a competitive setup. So starting that now and encouraging people for that now is the most important thing. If that's not most important to you, I completely understand. Perhaps testing now isn't something that needs to be a big priority for you. There are a lot of bugs. The game isn't nearly as fun as it will be later. Do what I'm doing. Wait.
And for God's sake, from patch 1.02 to patch 1.03, they made a massive buff to shields, if I recall, specifically to try to address some of these issues, as we've been talking about with the leaderboard. Hey, look, lasers are getting to be incredibly powerful. Let's buff shields to make sure that they take a little longer to kill someone. Just a little longer. This is going to happen, you guys want to take a pool? At least a couple hundred times before we actually see a live client.
Yeah.
No, it's gonna happen n+1 times.
Let's start talking about big O notation.
Now,
Hey,
N
say,
squared log
Bridger,
n. Yeah.
what the hell is with the lag pip that you're using? No lead pip for Bridger?
everybody's telling me lag pips are better because then you're focusing on the actual target. So I've been going with the default, but to me that sounds kind of backwards. I want the lead pip because, for example, if the target is underneath my display, like beneath my radar, for example, the lead pip might still be poking up and I can see it and aim at it even if the target is further below me. But I don't know. I'm just doing whatever it does.
I prefer the pip.
I haven't tried changing it since they changed the default to the lag pip, but I might try changing it on the next time I play.
There's been a lot of discussion about that lately. The lead pip is still seen as the best way to target people, just from like a point-and-click perspective, particularly.
I mean, it doesn't change where you're actually aiming. It just changes where you're focusing with your eyes, right?
It does change how you pilot your ship, pretty notably.
Ah.
The way that you can use a lag pip, particularly with the ESP that's by default on in the game, allows you to be pointing your ship in a direction so that you're more likely to lead your target properly when they take evasive maneuvers. It makes you less of a target, which is the entire reason that we generally use lag pip, in bin stuff and that kind of thing there. If you have a stick, in particular, it allows you to have much, much better piloting control during combat. That said, if you're talking about using a lead pip, particularly for the mouse keyboard crew, but even if you have a stick, you can put a lot more fire on the target at the expense of your own maneuverability. So you've got a little bit of a trade-off there depending on sensitivity and a few other things.
I'll have to give it a try. We'll definitely have a discussion about that in the future. I think 1.1 they've discussed in the recent letter from the chairman, right? They said 1.1 is going to drop, and then very shortly after we're going to get the FPS module and the planet side module. Like, I get the impression the way he was wording that, like those are going to come within a few weeks of each other, sometime in the next couple of months. So that sounds really interesting. And once 1.1 drops, that's going to have the rec thing, and it's going to have probably a lot of other big updates that they've been waiting to put in to fix some stuff. So I personally... Go ahead.
A quick note from chat, actually. From Ashlyn, Specifically with lag pips, you do have the ability on larger ships to drag that lag pip over a part of the ship. So you have better control over the exact
That's
spot you're
right.
targeting.
That's the other
Lead
one.
pips, you really can't do that. Yeah.
That's the other really
Anyway.
useful thing. But just one last thing in favor of lag pips is I noticed that when you're focusing on the target themselves, you can kind of see them maneuvering more easily than if you're just looking at the lead pip. Of course, the lead pip is going to be kind of flying left and right all around to try and, I don't know. Anyway, there's a couple other things on here. Gray, some people argue they shouldn't have to choose between paying to test and grinding to test. How would you respond to that?
Choose between paying to test and grinding to test. So what they're telling me is they are dissatisfied with being unable to use everything in the game.
That sounds
That's
like it.
the long and short of this. So the complaint here is not really, I don't want to have to pay to test or grind to test. The complaint is, I don't have access to everything for free.
Or I don't have access to the Super Hornet for free. Maybe that's all they care about.
I mean, really, they don't have access to whatever specific flavor of the month that they want to do for free with no time commitment and nothing else, which tells me that these are people who don't want to grind, which if you look at the system, it's not much of a grind. So they don't want to really play unless they are playing in a ship that they have set up to be exactly the way that they want it, which will not be how it is in the persistent universe when they start.
I think
I don't understand why CIG would encourage these people by saying, oh yeah, we'll just give you everything in hopes that you won't simply test the one flavor of the month that is going. They need people to test Auroras and 300 Eyes and Mustangs and whatever else this person happens to have. And the person's complaining, I don't want to fly my ship. I want to fly whatever seems most OP to me at the moment.
Yeah.
Wait for the PU.
One of the
Buy
things,
something that seems OP to you at the moment.
Yeah.
Not with cash, because you won't be able to. You will have to grind, because that's how the PU will work.
We can always replace the word grind with play.
Right? That's what I've been...
This is valid.
That's the other response that I would have had to this point is the game
CIG
is supposed to
play the
be...
game I bought.
The game is supposed to be enjoyable whether or not there's some freaking present at the end that explodes in fireworks and gives you a brand new thing. Like, Call of Duty, man! They ruined everything when they started throwing those stupid RPG mechanics in there and getting Skinner boxes and everything, and you can tell that maybe this might be one of the things that gets me angry, grinding my gears and such. But that all aside, one of the things that I thought was very clever is they specifically addressed we were arguing internally, like, should we just give everybody access to everything so that they can test everything? Because then, right now we only have X many Super Hornet pilots, and they're the only ones who can test this thing, and if there's not enough of them, or if there's not enough Cutlass pilots, or, insert X here, or people just don't want to try the ballistic, new weapon that we put out or whatever, then we won't get enough tests on it and bugs will slip through. That was an argument that was made internally, and that's a valid argument. So what they decided was the way that they can ensure that people will be willing to test things once they get updated or as they get added is they can discount items that they want tested more. So if they make a bunch of fixes to the ballistic weapons that had some bug that was causing problems with their damage, they can put like a 20% discount on all ballistic weapons for like a month or something like that. Or they could say, we just retweaked the balance on the Hornets and the Auroras, and we want people to test those, so we're going to give a 50%. We're going to slash it down to 50%, so if you don't own one of those ships, we're going to let you use that, and whatever. That's great. And because it's not permanent, because you don't earn these things permanently, that means that trick, the incentivizing people of testing the things that need to be tested, because this is an alpha test, you're not here just to enjoy the game for what it is. It's not finished yet. You're here, if you're here, to get an advanced look and to enjoy the experience of trying to make the game better. Maybe the game is enjoyable by itself right now to you. That's great. But they're not building this system as if it's the full game. And I highly expect this system to be reworked once we get into the actual game within a game where Arena Commander is built within the game thing. I fully expect that to change.
For Christ's sake, once we get into the game, it's likely you'll be able to use any ship that you've bought in the game by playing the real game in the arena game. which I will assume will be how a lot of people get used to flying a new ship, rather than, look at me, I bought a Gladiator. Now I'm going to fly out and die in 37 seconds in hostile Vandal space. No, you will probably want to practice with that first.
Yeah.
Just a little. And you know how you do that? You go into Arena Commander.
I
And,
assume,
I'm
you know
not
what, and
sure
that
if
makes
this
sense.
gun is what I'm looking for or not. You know what you do? You go into Arena Commander, and you use some of that REC that you've built up testing other ships to buy that gun you want to test in Arena Commander and see if you want to spend your hard-earned credits on it in-game. And by then testing that gun, you get more REC. Do then test your next gun. This is not brain surgery.
I foresee like a little thing too, like you buy a brand new constellation or something and it comes with little like digital USB equivalent, like a crystal or whatever data things they use, and you can like plug that into your Arena Commander thing and it's like you've unlocked the constellation because you physically own one, right? So you should be able to fly it in Arena Commander too. But anyway,
Yeah.
That all having been said, we spent way more time discussing this non-issue than I meant to. I meant to be like, this isn't worth discussing for more than 5 minutes. Let's move on. And then we kept talking. But
Man,
that's
the
what we
trolls win again.
did. Damn it. The terrorists win. All right. So before we go, though, Chris's responses were very, very good. And I hope he doesn't lose heart from the people that are causing this ruckus. But the thing that occurred to me, and what I'd love to see, they're not going to do it because they're a responsible company, but the justice porn addict in me would love to see them take all the people who are complaining, like the 24 people that are complaining the most, and just disable this whole system for them. They don't get access to it. They just get their main thing. Like, oh, you really don't like it. You're not being constructive. You're just flaming people. Okay, we'll just disable this for you, and everybody else can enjoy it, and now you're happy, right?
Can we have a show where we bring on moderators and just have a justice porn episode? I want all of their best stories, just one after the other. If I can still, like, feel my diaphragm afterwards from all the laughing, there won't have been enough stories. We just need to keep going.
Yeah, I agree, totally.
There was... I don't know if I could still find it, but there was an audio file that went around a long time ago. This was back in the days of 56K clan wars on like Quake, right? There was one kid that had constantly like been hacking or on this one server or what have you, and one of the server admins happened to be very proficient in the ability to follow IPs back to where they came from. So what he did was I guess he worked for the ISP or something like that. He was able to look up this guy's IP and get the phone number for that house where the kid lived, called it, got the kid's parents, and the audio file is him calling up and being like, yes, sir, this is Mike Hunt. I work for such and such ISP, and we're calling because we've been seeing an awful lot of hardcore pornography being sent from the IP located in your house, and that's against our terms of service, sir, and we can't, allow you to continue. And the guy totally bought it, because in the background, you can hear him saying to his wife, like, go get Jimmy right now. Like, it was great. It was so great. All right. But that's enough of that. Anyway, let's move on a little bit. Let's move on. Let's talk about Cassandra's
Something
tears.
positive.
Yeah, Cassandra's tears. Something positive? Cassandra's tears doesn't sound like it's going to be positive. I came on here and I was like, so, did you guys read it? Are we ready to go? Tim's like, I couldn't get past episode 4. I'm sorry. It was so bad. All right.
I like how you make my voice sound so deep and manly.
You're right. That's what I do. That's my go-to other person voice. Yeah.
But it's also the Australian accent. It immediately translates to manliness here.
That's
in
true.
The US.
Foster's,
I'll take
Australian
that.
for beer. And you have no idea what that is, right?
This is so bad.
I knew that was going to happen. All right, so...
Oh.
For those of you not in the know, Cassandra's Tears is a story set within the Star Citizen universe. Although I would argue that it is a story within a story. I would argue that this is like a fictional story set within the Star System universe that is created as propaganda to try and get people to join the UE Navy. So, spoilers, by the way. Spoilers past this point. Actually, no. Not quite spoilers. Without spoilers, what is your guys' overall impression? Would you recommend it? Start with Tim. Thumbs down. We go to Tim for our non-word answer.
You didn't even get one word this time.
No. Okay. Gray, your overall impression.
Read a different story. I appreciate some of their dogfighting in here, specifically small ship dogfighting, because it shows some potentially interesting things when they start talking about, this isn't really spoilers, panels flipping off of ships and exposing extra thrusters, or some larger ship that is quote-unquote shelling an area and having explosive indirect fire that's supposed to prevent other ships from flying through there. Okay, that's interesting. Thank you. You have provided me with entertainment and something I can look forward to in the persistent universe. Excuse me. But when they start talking about the large capital ships and gravity slingshots, and one of the
Oh
ships
my god,
falling
the
into
gravity
the atmosphere.
slingshot.
See, I think I'll leave this part to Tim because I'm more of a layperson. I have taken a large amount of physics over the years. Tim lives it, and Tim probably a little more in pain than I was, and for me it was enough to just be like, oh no. Oh no.
All right, so
please, no.
before we get into the gravity slingshots, I'll be a little more kind. I enjoyed the story, though there were many pieces of it where my suspension of disbelief was punctured, let's say. I still made it through to the end without an issue. I remember reading it quite a while ago, and I mean, it was enjoyable. It had an interesting twist ending. It wasn't great literature. It wasn't like... it's definitely not as good as Kid Crimson. Kid Crimson had this dark, gritty, and the ending was actually a little bit, didn't see it coming. You know, you thought that it was looking like it was going to be one kind of trope, and then they twisted on you and did a different thing, and it was really well done in that sense. But that wasn't great writing either, but something in here just there's a lot of pieces in here that made me write out, hey, why is this happening? So let's get back into it. So for those of you that haven't read it and are still listening, sure, we're going to go a little overview for you. So Cal Mason is the hotshot pilot, a la Maverick, a la Han Solo, whatever you want. He's the hotshot pilot that is the protagonist in this story. And we get introduced to him, but it's called a Cal Mason story. And that's the first thing that kind of makes me think, like, within the game's universe, there's a series of stories about Cal Mason, and that maybe he's like a fictional, stereotypical Navy pilot guy that they're trying to use to attract people to the UE. Because the whole thing just screams like, look how awesome you can be if you're in the UEE. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, I could see that. I mean, if it's in-universe fiction, in fiction.
Yeah.
So it's the equivalent of reading okay sci-fi within a sci-fi universe, where
just something that's sort of jingoistic, like Tom Clancy amped up to 7. You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of the way I see it.
I could buy that. I could see that. And if that's how it was intended, I think that's totally reasonable.
I don't know why I chose 7. 7 is a powerful number, I guess. So, anyway, we're introduced to Cal Mason. He is a pilot who's recovering from an injury, and he's on the carrier Gemini, which I assume is a Bengal-class carrier, but we don't really know when this is supposed to have taken place. I get the impression that this is earlier than present day, but that's only because they use fighters including a cestus, a zipper, and 2 anvils. And I assume they're talking about gladiators there, which means they don't have hornets yet. Or this is just made so early that they didn't really have all that solidified. One or the other. So
that was definitely the feel I got as well.
Yeah. It's hard to tell, I mean, if this is just early literature, which is possible. I mean, we might just be looking at some of the early stuff. Or if we're looking at something that has a little different meaning. But I don't really care to try to go into that speculative game with this one.
So, at the end of chapter 1, basically, the hotshot pilot, who's always disobedient, who always winds up saving the day, and that's why he never really gets punished, goes to see the Admiral. The Admiral says, you shouldn't be out of sickbay yet. He's like, try to keep me out of the sky. And the Admiral says, you're grounded. And then the alarms go off because the Vanduul are coming, and he runs out, gets in his ship, and starts leaving before they can stop him. And the Admiral orders his pilot, Penny, who is, I guess, a friend of Cal's, like, the Admiral told me to shoot you. He's like, well, I guess you're just gonna have to shoot me. Damn it, Cal, like, he's always like, Cal, you're always being disobedient, but you're so damn good, we can't actually punish you for it. That's part of the suspension of disbelief, is this, no Navy is gonna let this guy get away with what he gets away with.
He steals ship off the flight deck while technically on medical leave.
While there is an emergency. Like,
without being noticed by any of the ground crews.
Yeah.
What's it? Oh, it's just Cal.
And the Admiral recognizes that he's taking off, not by the fact that a ship that's not authorized is taking off the flight deck,
but because it's
but
Cal.
by that guy's hot shot takeoff method.
That's right. His flourish. His takeoff flourish. That's definitely Cal. Get back here, Cal.
Oh, man. God, he's so hot.
So anyway, chapter 2 goes into a furball with the Vanduul, which takes place in Atmo, which again scrambles like sensors and radio communication for some reason. This is a planet that's apparently livable.
Just use atmosphere. You don't need to shorten that word. Atmosphere is not a long word. It says Atmo every single time. Like, if you were talking, if it was like two characters talking to one another, I can imagine, we're heading in Atmo. I can understand that. But in the descriptive text, when you're actually like the non-diegetic text, you don't say Atmo, just say atmosphere. It's not difficult.
Yes. So there are a couple of things in here. Now, we learn that the zippers are the ships that apparently they rely on their speed in order to do anything useful. They mentioned that a zipper lost a thruster.
In chapter 2, he uses IE. Like, he says, these guys, the zippers, which is the speed, i.e. their main advantage.
Yeah.
You don't use IE
Not in a narrative way, no.
No. That's horrible.
That's something you use on a research paper, damn it.
I saw...
Or
no,
a
you don't use
persuasive
it on a
writing.
research paper. I saw that, and it was like someone had, like, sucker punched my uvula. It was horrible.
You don't even need that. You just put the one strength they have in parentheses, and you're good. That's like, yes, that's how you write that. Is one of the zippers took a hit to its thrusters, clipping its speed. The one strength they have, like that's okay. That's acceptable. You don't have to put i.e. the one strength they have. You're right. That was probably something that should have been edited properly. Anyway. The actual fight does seem, fairly consistent with other fights that we've seen written about as far as the dogfighting, and it's fairly consistent with Arena Commander. I didn't see anything particular that shot out, except the Vanduul scythe, using its wing to cut through enemy ships. That, to me, okay, I know
in
that
Atmo.
They're way in the
this
future.
This is particularly notable, is that's in Atmo. Atmo?
Now...
Tim?
I know that I'm no physicist, Tim, but I've heard that for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. How exactly is this scythe cutting with its wing at exactly the balancing point so that it doesn't just start spinning off to the side somewhere? It just because it's like
if it has enough momentum, it's fine. Really,
I guess.
But
is it just cutting through steel and titanium that easily?
It's really sharp.
I guess so.
That's what Vanduuls do. They make really sharp things. They're really good at it.
Stupid Black Talon. He's the bad guy in the whole thing, right? So now we get to the weird thing here, and this is more than the weird maneuver that the Admiral has to do that Tim is going to flip out about in a second. Oh. The dramatic tension in this chapter is built because there's the fighters, Cal Mason included, are fighting the Vanduul in the atmosphere of this planet, and a new wing of fighters and a capital ship, like a flagship, a Vanduul flagship, arrives and heads towards the planet. And they can't get in contact with the fighters, the UEE fighters, to tell them, hey, turn back, you're about to get ambushed. So the captain, so this is the planet. They're fighting around the planet. The Vandal's coming over here. The captain's like, I have to like burn at full speed to go in between the planet and the enemy flagship to provide them an escape route from the planet. Presumably the planet is spherical. You can just go to the other side while you're under the cloud cover and go out that way. That bugged the fuck out of me. Like, we have to get there before the flagship does. Like, the flagship can't go in atmosphere. Neither can the Gemini. Why are you freaking worried? Send another fighter in there with the new information. Say, guys, when you win the fight, don't come straight out of the atmosphere because you'll walk into a trap. Instead, go around. Ugh. Anyway, that's what bugged me about it. And why is the super veteran admiral on the bridge? They describe him as like this grizzled veteran. He's seen so much combat. He's so old. He's seen everything. Nobody would dare question him, right? Meanwhile, his lieutenant, his guy at the helm is like, Admiral, that's awfully close to the planet. I know. Take us in anyway. Like, he's taking this horribly huge risk. The carrier is at huge risk.
How close are they into the planet? Are they in geosynchronous orbit over this point where everybody is fighting?
I get the impression they're not in orbit because of the way they describe it. They have to, like, stationarily thrust towards the planet to keep themselves from falling in. They're not in orbit. They're just stationary.
Only the UEE ship.
No, both of them.
Not the Vandal one?
They're both, but the Vandal is further out, so there's less gravity, you see.
How much for... Oh, God.
I just don't understand
God.
how he could become this grizzled veteran admiral taking stupid freaking risks. And why? Because he thinks Cal is like as his son that you shouldn't adopt, like, you shouldn't like get emotionally invested in a guy that takes 99% chance risks that he's gonna die every single day. Like, this guy, the number of times this guy gets away with some crazy ass risk is incredible. So, anyway.
Yeah, it's truly, truly gross.
That brings us to Chapter 3 and the gravity assist.
So, the gravity assist is something that we see so often in sci-fi. And part of me is happy that they're at least trying to, hey, look, there's a real thing that we do, gravity assists. But a gravity assist in real life can take anywhere between 8 hours to a month. Like, it's not something, it's like, they call it a slingshot, it's a gravity slingshot, but it's not like an actual slingshot. Like, you don't pull it back and put off to the side. Like, it's not how it works.
Well,
and also,
go ahead.
The gravity assist in this one would to get the speed for a gravity assist, you have to go all the way around the planet and come back around the other side. Now, even the International Space Station, the shortest it can do that is 90 minutes. And it doesn't seem to me like this is a 90-minute long piece of event that they're doing at all.
It's skirted along the edge of the atmosphere, used the gravity to slingshot it around until the port side dropped directly underneath the Vandal ship. And this is the other piece that got me. The Gemini ship unleashed every weapon it could into the weak underbelly. Who builds a capital ship with a weak underbelly?
No one's gonna look there.
We just won't let the enemy get underneath us. Of course, we'll build a ship so that it can rotate at really inhuman speeds.
Oh no, he hit me in my soft spot.
That bugged me. That one really bugged me. Here's what I think.
It's a Vandal, like, kingship. This is a capital ship in the truest sense of the word, with a weak underbelly.
Yeah, I don't get it. Here's what I think
if
they
only
were trying...
we had put the armor plating on my ankle.
Here's, I think, what they were trying... Let me see if I can get this. So Tim, I think this is what they were trying to describe, right? You got the planet. You've got the two capital ships basically broadside against each other, right? This is not going to be easy to try and show. Okay. I'm terrible at holding chopsticks and apparently terrible at holding this. So you got the two different ships broadside firing at each other, right? For some reason, like, in super close proximity. And the planet's right there. So the UEE ship is this red pen that's closest to... There we go. Closest to the planet, right? I get the impression that what they needed to do was, like, have the whole thing do this and then come back up. So they kept the thrusters on, like, one side of the ship still good, while the rest of the ship had the thrusters drop and then kick back on the other side so that, not the back of the ship came off, that would be wrong, so that they would do this, towards the planet. So imagine right now gravity's that way. They drop this, the thrusters on this side stop thrusting to keep them up. The thrusters on this side stay there. It goes like this and swings back around. And then all the thrusters keep them there, only now they're underneath the Van Duel instead of being over here. So they do something that looks like this. That's what I think they were trying to describe. I don't think they did a great job because it took me a little while to figure that out.
Yeah, that's some serious mental gymnastics. Gymnastics. I'm sorry, I'm turning into a
This story has hurt your brain that much.
Gymnastics.
The gymnastics. Because across the pond. Yeah. So stuff and things, and also there was a comment before that was it's Hollywood. You don't need to try and make physics out of it, but you don't also need to not make physics out of it. Like you can actually do proper physics and Hollywood really, really well. I mean, Interstellar was a fantastic example of that. Gravity was a pretty good example, not fantastic, but it was still, I enjoyed it. Like, yeah, and even, I mean, you don't need to just fly in the face of realism in order to make a good story. The two are actually compatible quite well.
Okay, so bringing this back sort of and tying it into Star Citizen specifically, they do mention a few things that are interesting that we've never quite seen before. They say the last anvil was at a distance pounding arty. They called it arty. They didn't want to call it artillery. Presumably this guy just in his head when he's
is that what arty is?
Yeah, arty is artillery. Arty is short for artillery.
I thought it was just a
guy. Pounding Arty and the Raider? Just like, Arty, go! Go! Freaking go towards the Raider!
Who is Arty? I don't understand this part. Don't abbreviate things, kids.
No, you abbreviate them after you've used the full word one time, usually. Or you put it in parentheses.
Don't ever abbreviate.
Oh, okay. Never. Okay, good. FBI. I mean Federal Bureau of Investigation. Damn, he's got away. So.
Oh, you can acronym. Acronyms are fine. Not
okay. Different. I'm learning where the Tim Young rules of English are.
That's where the line is.
Okay. So what do they mean by artillery? I don't.
It sounds like airburst
artillery?
shells.
I guess, yeah.
You fire into an area where you don't want people to fly, yeah, and you make things explode. I mean, that really just sounds like what it is.
And I guess it's a gladiator shooting like flak-based missiles or something like that.
It's worth noting this is in the atmosphere.
So they're gonna ignite the atmosphere.
You're talking about fireballs, more than likely.
True.
So maybe that was the whole plan. Maybe they have these ships that are set up to actually do atmospheric combat with fireball things, because clearly that's an efficient use of resources.
And this is another thing
that bugged me.
Space fireballs.
No. In atmosphere. This is not in space.
Right. This whole fight takes place in atmosphere. The two capital ships are still outside, or at the very least in the very far part of the atmosphere. But I get the impression that this is happening in atmosphere. But here's another thing that bugged me. The Anvil pilot was trying to lead Black Talon, but the Vandal is proving as adept at dodging indirect fire as he was at dodging direct. The whole notion of that just sounds weird. It sounds like he's talking about actual physical artillery, but obviously he's not. Arg. Anyway, I think that means they're talking about a gladiator there. But, let's see. They get to the part now where Gray was mentioning before, where the Vandal gets in trouble, and so he pops a bunch of panels off of his ship to reveal a bunch of hidden thrusters that he uses to pull some kind of suicide, Crazy Ivan-style maneuver that they didn't think he could. I don't know. Gray, you seem to think that this is an indication of something we'll be able to do inside Star Citizen?
They've talked about custom paneling a couple of times now, in a couple of different stories. Now, whether this will actually be something that we have in at launch, who the heck knows? But it sounds like they are trying to make it so you can have extra maneuvering thrusters as, like, a thing.
I don't see why hiding it is going to give you an advantage.
That was my thought.
I don't think it's about hiding it so much. I think it's about armoring it.
Protecting it? Yeah, maybe.
I think it's about having plates in play that prevent people from telling what you're about to do, and, for that matter, prevent them from blowing your thrusters off. Because
or if your
I would
thrusters do get
imagine
blown
that-
off, you can reveal these extra 8 new ones that replace the previous ones or something.
I would imagine, I mean, there's Carbonal asking in chat, why would you ever limit your mobility just for surprise? Well, it's two things. One of them would be if you don't need to use them all the time for general maneuvering, that's a lot of extra fuel. So you'd have to just have them shut off all the time and exposed to vacuum, which isn't necessarily the best thing for them. The other thing that I can think is if somebody were to blow them off when you weren't planning on using them, then you've got a problem. So it could be a fuel thing, it could be a defensive thing. Either way, I'm willing to suspend disbelief and say, if you want to have hidden paneling for something, yeah, go for it. That sounds at least like an interesting idea.
So
I think it's silly.
I kind of think it's silly too. But the only thing I think that is valid is I think you're right. If you wanted to protect these extra thrusters rather than expose them to damage, then that seems to make sense. So the next thing that happens here is because the Gemini, the capital, the Bengal carrier, or the carrier, whatever class it is, fired into the weak underbelly of the Vandals start to bug out. But during the middle of this fight, a bunch of Vandal ignored the big melee that was happening in the atmosphere and actually dove down to a settlement, an abandoned settlement, picked up a bunch of big machines, and then took off with them, and then, rendezvoused with the Vandal capital ship, and they bugged out. And again, at the end, our freaking hero is ordered back home, and he says, "Oh, the Vandal's still here? I just saw something's not right. This wasn't a raid." And she's like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "I need a favor." She says, "I never like sentences that start out that way." And he says, "I need you to cover with me with the Admiral." And he's like, "You gotta be joking." He's like, "I'll check in when I have more." "I'll check in when I have more? You just discovered that they came here, picked up very specific equipment, and left. You couldn't literally say that as fast as I just did? Like, Penny, this is how fast you could say it. Penny, I'm going after him. There's more to this. Send somebody down to that colony. You'll see what I mean. Done! Done! Bam! That's all he has to do. Or he just sends her the images and says, I'm concerned that they took some equipment that's going to make something very bad, and I'm going after him. Like, he just leaves her completely clueless as to why he's going. Of course, because he's the big damn hero, so he has to be cryptic. That's, I guess, the requirement. Anyway, Chapter 4, he essentially catches up to the Vandal using what I can only assume is like a decoupled mode. Is that the impression you guys got?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
he just started going really fast, like accelerated to a certain speed to catch up with them, and then shut down all his power and just drifted into the middle of the Vandal fleet. Only they spot him, so somehow, and they don't actually describe it, somehow he sends his ship off towards the jump point minus himself. Somehow he got out of his ship and jumped down onto the flagship. I guess they were going at approximately the same speed, or he has jet boots or something ridiculous. It's kind of sounding like Guardians of the Galaxy at this point. Yeah. Then he sneaks through the entire Vandal flagship and gets to the hangar without ever being spotted. Again, this is another one of those points where I go, come on, lazy story writing. This is ridiculous. You're not going to put, like, an alien on the USS Nimitz and have it sneak through the halls of a carrier and get to the hangar bay. Like, that just, it hurt my head. It hurt my head. So, he manages to get there. He gets to the hangar bay. He realizes that something is going on when there's a constellation in the hangar bay that is, like, picking up the machines, and he gets caught, and he becomes a prisoner on the Constellation. They get away from the Vandal, and it turns out the Constellation is filled with pirates who are doing business with the Vandal. And at this point, the story kind of gets interesting, but at the same time, these pirates are portrayed in a very negative light. Like, pirates, they're working with the Vandal against the humanity. Obviously, they're evil. Like, that's another thing that made it feel like a propaganda piece, right? Piracy's bad, and pirates are bad, and they're not good people ever. So he basically sits on this, the what they call the Phoenix, which is the Constellation ship, and he kind of interacts with some of the pirates there, and they essentially figure out, he kind of figures out, okay, they've got this machinery, they're going to be building something, it has to do with Cassandra, And later on, he barely escapes. He like tricks him and gets the big guy and like with a knife to his throat. And he's right at the P-52 Merlin, and he like pushes the big guy away, jumps in the Merlin, and takes off. And he does his crazy, another freaking 99% gonna kill you maneuver of going through a jump point in a Merlin after a caterpillar. Like, he kind of goes in on the same time the caterpillar opened the jump point, and he's got to navigate it behind the caterpillar. He does that to get away from the Constellation. Figures out that the Constellation is building some sort of bomb by following it with another actual ship. It's all ridiculous. It's all ridiculous, because he should just report this and be like, wow, that was an ordeal. I'll let the actual authorities who are in place to take care of this. Nope, I'm just going to borrow a cutlass from the authorities, say, this is my job, I'm going to go take care of it. He tracks it down, finds out they're building a bomb they're going to use to wipe out Earth, and it's actually the Vanduul that are asking for this to happen. So the Vanduul get the bomb. The Constellation ship has a change of heart just so that they can have that scene where the Millennium Falcon comes back in and saves Luke. I'm sorry, I mean the Constellation comes back in and saves the day right at the end. The ending felt a little bit contrived. Very, yeah.
Well, see, I didn't get to the ending because
I just gave it to you. There you
chapter
go.
4 and was like, I can't. What is this? I don't even.
So that's the long and short of it. It was an enjoyable ride, not nearly as enjoyable as Kid Crimson. So yeah. That's about all there is to it. The ending itself is kind of interesting. The scene, the parallel with the Millennium Falcon wasn't necessarily bad taste. It was interesting. It just seemed, I don't know, the motivations of the pirate crew never felt right. Like, they're trying to decide whether they should kill him or not. They offer him a place on their ship, and he can either stay with them permanently or he could work off, earn his keep for a few months and then go back to the UEE. But why would you do that? Why would you take that risk? Like, the point of killing him...
absolutely no sense.
Right, the point of killing him is to make sure he can't report you. But why would you offer to let him live if he just works with you for a few months? Like, of course he'll just say yes and then pretend, and then at the first place they stop, run away and call the police or call the Navy or what have you. But instead, his stupid pride is like, no, I could never do that. I'm a pilot, damn it. And we pilots, we're all awesome, and we're prideful, and we're great, and we wouldn't do such a horrible thing, you dirty pirate. Like, that's not what he says, but that's essentially what he does. He does the stupid thing, which is my pride is more important than my life, and then somehow still gets out of it anyway. That's why it feels, again, like this propaganda piece of, like, look how awesome our pilots are, rather than look how this reflects reality. That's what bugged me. All right.
Onward to better things.
Onward to better things. So you guys saw that we had the mining release recently. That one was really interesting.
Yes.
Let's pull that up here.
Talk about a pretty ship to introduce that concept with, by the way.
Right?
Oh,
They really
ridiculously
knocked that
good.
out of the park.
It really is gorgeous. And we had seen a little bit of the information on this. And it's, what is it, $375 is the price for the concept sale? Is that right? Here we are.
Something like that, yeah.
$325, yeah.
325, yeah.
At least if you're in the U.S., I'm sorry if you are now in Europe and paying taxes on digital goods, like people in Texas were already.
So what is this? They're showing this off here. I think this must be like... I'm trying to figure this out. So they've got customer services, trade and development divisions. So this must be something like on a planet or something trying to show off. Because
Yeah, so
within
this
this
is the
article...
That is
mining
raw
unit.
materials. Yep. So a big part about the trade and development on mining, and I guess we can start from this angle, is it seems that they have two ways that you can be a miner. One of them is you take jobs and you lock in the rate that you get on those minerals, which will doubtless be less than whatever the going rate is on the market. The other way is that you go out and you mine, and you get a hole full of whatever the crap you find, and then you sell it to whoever seems to want it at the time. So there's no guarantee of the price of whatever you're mining. So if you go out there and you mine a whole bunch of silver, and everybody else has been mining silver for the past 2 hours, you could well be screwed.
You might have to wait in order to get your money. You got to wait for the market to be right, or you have to travel somewhere where silver is in demand more.
Which raises some interesting questions about storage and, a variety of other things that we just can't speculate on yet. But it does mean that there might be a more volatile commodities market because they do intend clearly to make it volatile enough to actually
Be worthwhile.
discourage people
Yeah.
from doing it, and to be worthwhile to have people actually do the integration. But we will see how that whole thing goes.
Now, Tim, I don't know how much you know about the actual makeup of asteroids. They show here it's like aluminum 13%, copper 6%, iron 4%, lead 12%. Are these heavier metals? Are those actually what asteroids tend to be made up of?
Yeah, totally.
Oh.
I mean, you get a lot of iron. I mean, there's different types of asteroids,
Sure.
depending on where they were formed, how old they are, how old the star was that formed them. So a later generation star has higher what we call metallicity, which is the higher the metallicity, the more heavier elements that are in it.
Mm-hmm.
Although astronomers cheat because astronomers count everything that isn't hydrogen or helium
As
is
a
technically
metal.
a metal to us.
Yeah. There you go.
It's like the
Always
old
works.
joke of ask an astronomer how big is pi, and they'll look at their left hand and say about 5.
Wait, why?
And you say, well, hang on, how many fingers are on your left hand? And they look at their left hand and say about 10.
What? Why would they? Because
you look at something, you just round it to the nearest order of magnitude.
I
really.
see. I see what they do there. I see.
So
okay.
how big is how heavy is that guy? 100 kilograms, or 1,000 kilograms?
One of those two.
Within one order of magnitude.
That's right. That's all. I don't understand.
So the point is that asteroids themselves are actually really, really good in terms of richness of metals. We did a scan of one recently to have a look at, so looking at the sampling of the surface. If what we're looking at on the surface in terms of some of the sputtering tests that we've done where you fire pellets into the asteroid and see what comes out, if that's a good representation of what it's like further in, and all sort of everything suggests that it is, for homogeneity reasons, which are complicated, but just like, let's go with it. We're looking at some of these asteroids that are about, 1 kilometer, 2 kilometers across, being worth about roughly $70 trillion.
Whoa! If that was just
In
like
terms
you
of-
had those raw materials on Earth, like on ground level.
Yeah.
I know
And
how
that's
we
not
can
even-
get them on ground level.
Well, sure. I mean,
You
if
just
don't-
put a
don't-
wanna
rocket on the back of
survive?
it and point it towards Earth. What
Exactly.
could possibly go wrong?
So, I mean, yeah, absolutely. I mean, these are the kind of metals. The other things you would see is a lot of platinum. We see a lot of platinum up there. I think also palladium was another one that we found in surprisingly large amounts. So there's some really good stuff. But the funny thing is that if you actually did start mining these asteroids, assuming you only had the Earth, we didn't have this big multi-star system, colonized planets, and all the rest of it, one asteroid would easily crash the whole world's market for metal. Like, it would just completely destroy it.
Means
so
we need a bigger market first.
we need a bigger market. So obviously, when you've got several hundred planets to settle on, that's not going to be much of an issue. But absolutely, mining asteroids is technically feasible and financially feasible. Absolutely.
All right, so then they move on to a section where they talk about how you find a suitable asteroid. This was kind of interesting, and Gray, I know you were commenting on this earlier. What struck out to you in this as something that's really interesting or novel? Or
The number
nouveau?
of people involved with the process is one of them. Having a single player to do the finding the asteroid, and they talked a little bit about one of the potential starter ships. What was it called again? Terrapin? That we could have voted for and we didn't. Apparently everybody wanted to miss one. That would have been a single-player mining ship, and that person would have then been responsible for doing all of the spectrum analysis on these things and firing. I thought the missile idea was very unique. I'm not sure how well it will play out once people get really good at it. But...
Whoa! You just blow up the asteroid and then you mine the smaller pieces?
No. You have
No,
to
it's like a
scan...
seismic thing.
Yeah, you have to scan for a place in the asteroid that appears to be a weak enough point that you could fire one of these missiles at it and get towards the core. And you fire this missile at a specific speed, I guess the higher the speed, the better, or whatever it happens to be, and a specific angle, and you try to land that missile at that speed and that angle that's considered optimum at that exact point. And if you do that, it drives a sensor way down into the middle of it, so the next person who actually does the mining has accurate seismic data and information about what's actually going on with the
I
asteroid.
was under the impression that it didn't so much push a sensor in. It was more that it was a surface impactor, and then it allowed you to measure like the P waves and S waves in terms of seismic activity.
This is true, though it does require you to have a very specific angle of impact, which doesn't sound like it's going to be just 90 degrees every time. I'm kind of wondering what's up with that.
I
Yeah,
foresee
well, so-
like people flying these things like a first-person camera mode, a la like Star Trek Into Darkness when they're flying through space. You have like that HUD where you have to try to follow the actual path so that you get the perfect angle on the way in. I don't know. I could see that being one way to do it, but or you have to position the ship properly to shoot at the right angle while this thing's
I
spinning.
think it's a combination of the both.
Yeah.
Is what they were implying.
Yeah.
It could be. And that's a really interesting mechanic.
But
The idea that
Oh,
there's
yeah.
this preparation phase going into mining, rather than it just being, I found an asteroid, I'm going to point lasers at it and see what happens.
Yeah.
And what might happen is it explodes. You actually have this phase of let's find out exactly what's in there and get this whole orientation and actually have a piloting skill cap. Well,
Yeah.
skill ceiling, whatever you want to call it. To be able to make this happen. I mean, miners have to be pretty exceptional pilots if you're the person who's being a scan operator.
Now,
If that's not your thing, I'd say
the
do
other
something else.
interesting thing that I noticed is they're talking about how you find an asteroid field to begin with. I mean, there's like
Yes.
asteroid fields that are just public knowledge where an entry-level miner might start, but the remaining ore is so, low quality and it's not the valuable minerals and things like that you could go there, but you'd have to like go to one asteroid, mine a little bit, go to another one because it's spread thin, because nobody's going to leave a full asteroid that you can just sit there and harvest for a while. But there are valuable new fields located by explorers, and those explorers could then, for example, keep it to themselves and just tell their own guild, hey, bring our mining group over here, I found a new thing. Or they could sell it to an information broker that would then make it available to people who are willing to pay for it. And then they get, you pay for exclusivity, it'd just be like an auction block, like a guy in a thing. We now have new rights on a mining field located in the such sector, blah, blah, blah. And it's got 60% titanium and 30% copper, blah, blah, whatever. And then, I paid 3,200 million credits for that. That'd just be kind of funny if that happened, actually. Anyway, they also, like, or you could just go and find it yourself. Just go find it yourself, no problem. Just take your 315P and then have an Orion follow behind you.
I mean, it definitely suggests a whole lot of unexplored space in systems to be able to have reasonably big asteroid fields to be able to run around in.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's true in real life. Even the main asteroid belt that we've got, it's a big guy. Like, there's a lot of little asteroids in there.
It could have been a planet. Stupid Jupiter, ruining everything.
Ruins everyone's day.
Or at least the day of that planet. We should give a name to that failed planet. So now this is the Orion
it has
here.
one.
It does?
Yeah, that's Ceres.
Yeah.
No, that's
the big
just one
chunk
of them.
there.
That's the biggest chunk?
I think it's the biggest chunk, yeah.
Ah, well, yeah.
It's
I
the only
guess.
one. Ceres is the only one in the asteroid belt that has hydrostatic equilibrium. So that's what would have been the planet.
Gotcha. That means that it's spherical?
Yes.
Essentially?
Sorry, I used a fancy word, but I should have just said it's round.
I know.
To
I'm
lay
just-
people here, that means it's round.
I'm just pointing out that I, too, know the cool lingo. So
I'm down.
So this is the picture of the Orion that we've seen so far, and you can see the various positions that they're talking about, especially like if you look in the middle of the screen here, you can see they've got what look like little control towers that could be like the scan operator, right? And then they have these laser position things on the side, and there's another one up here. That looks more like a turret, like a gun turret.
I think that's a flat cannon.
Yeah, and then but these other ones closer to the front here are probably the lasers that control, pulling and pushing the pieces of minerals away. Or those are the lasers that actually do the cutting into the thing. But I think since they're so close to this sort of mouth area here, that those are probably the tractor beams, and that the one on the top here, yes, it's a precision laser for cutting, and then tractor beams located right there on
By
the
the
front.
way, just throwing this out there, am I the only one who've noticed the brilliance of putting flat cannons on a mining ship? Can you imagine the sheer quantity of just shards of crappy, inexpensive metal that you could load into those cannons?
Or just rock.
Yeah.
Yeah, or just rock. You have 4 flat cannons on this ship. You're going to fill
fact-
that with so much garbage all the time.
I feel like we should even just call them slag cannons.
Yeah.
We just
Pretty
fire
much.
slag.
I mean, I'm hoping that's what they do, because it would just be so awesome to be like, okay, I'm loading up the guns here.
Extending grinder assembly. That sounds fun. Now, I would wonder... I wonder what would happen if you fed a ship into that grinder assembly. Like, let's just see what happens if we fly an Aurora in there. Like, that's going to be one of the first things I try to do if I ever get access to an Orion. Like, hey, Bill, you've got an Aurora, right? Send it over here. I need you to come to these specific coordinates. Joe, those are within your ship. Yeah, enter through the front. It's a docking bay. I don't think he'd get that. But, yeah, it's a pretty damn impressive ship overall. And we did talk about this a little bit back when the PAC South thing, they sort of talked about the mining and how it has the different roles and the various scans that have to be done to ensure you don't accidentally blow up the asteroid. Now, I assume they're taking a little bit of poetic license with this. Yes, I mean, asteroids aren't just going to blow up if we go try to mine them in reality, right?
Yes and no. I mean, so one of the things they talk about that's really cool is the presence of not just volatiles, but also of gases at all. I mean, if you're using any kind of heat-based, mining mechanic, which a laser is, what you're going to have is you're going to have the atomization. Oh God, I've seen this one.
I see. Sorry, Tim. I was distracted.
That's cool.
Go ahead.
So what you have is you're gonna atomize some of the rock, some of the metal, and it's gonna turn into a gas. And that gas has nowhere to go. I mean, it takes up more physical volume than it did back when it was a solid. So what you're gonna have is explosive decompression more than anything, and that's gonna send a huge wave of debris and gas sort of exploding into your face, just purely as a pressure wave. And that's going to do some serious damage.
What are they talking about volatiles? Are they talking like radioactive items or?
Yeah, volatile can mean so many different things. In chemistry, a volatile usually just means anything that is electrically unstable, or electronegatively unstable, I should say, and so that it'll bond with something. So a volatile would be something like, a chlorine ion, you would call a volatile.
Like an acid.
Or anything, just anything that will react at all.
Gotcha.
There is quite a bit of stuff that will react in the world.
Oh yeah, exactly. In this case, what I think they're talking about is things that could potentially explode in terms of what their meaning of volatile is.
Exothermic
and again,
reaction detector.
Yeah. Because if you look at aluminium, if you get aluminium ground into a very small particle size, it's rocket fuel. Like it explodes.
Really?
Yeah, if you get aluminium oxide and you grind it really small,
that stuff is awesome.
It will explode. And you look at a sparkler. A sparkler is essentially aluminium oxide.
Okay. Now, is this a newly discovered element? I've never heard of this aluminium.
All right, you crazy Yanks. You're aluminum.
I'm just pulling your chain.
All right. So we're effectively talking about thermite here in some cases too.
Really?
Metal oxides and all that. Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
yeah, I mean, pretty much anything
I kind of assumed that they were like
explode.
over exaggerating the dangers to make this more skill based, but it's kind of nice that it's not quite.
When you start putting a whole bunch of metal and crap through a grinder, it can be bad. Bad things can happen.
Are you sure?
Which is why when you're actually working in the mining industry, you'll see that not only do they often do things in aqueous form, but they also quite often just cover things in water whenever they're grinding or processing, because it reduces wear on the bits as well, but also it stops you from getting any sparking or any sort of buildup of heat etc. The other really cool thing that they're doing with the mining thing is if you can bring up slide number 10, it was, I think, on that little image thing you had.
All right, let me pull it up. This is 11:10 right here.
That's the one. So this is a really cool thing they're doing with the seismic wave activity as well.
Mm-hmm.
That shape that you've got there isn't arbitrary. You can actually see that underneath it there's a series of sine waves.
Mm-hmm.
And those sine waves are pure sine waves. They're not sort of funky or anything. It's just, amplitude. In fact, the amplitude of all of them is the same.
Mm-hmm.
Just the frequency is slightly different. But that big sort of one with the red and blue on it, that is what's called the wave supposition of all those underlying sine waves.
Mm-hmm.
So what they've actually got is they've got a system that can every time you touch the asteroid, you create a shock wave, which is true. This does happen. And those shock waves start to build up. So you've got to be careful about how you are, touching the asteroid, how you are pounding it on one side or laser cutting it on the other side to make sure that the wave supposition doesn't create constructive interference. And that's what you're getting with those big red peaks there.
Uh-huh.
So that's a really a high science concept that they're utilizing for the game mechanics, which is really cool. I mean, I am really, really excited about that.
So that is more multiple lasers or things being used simultaneously to speed up the process. There's more danger of that.
You can do it even just with yourself. I mean, it's the same concept of pushing someone on a swing. You always push them when they're at the end of the swinging arc. And by doing that, by always adding energy at the end of the arc forwards, you're adding constructive interference to the linear oscillation.
Gotcha. Because
so even just tapping it over and over again in that same pattern is going to add more and more energy to the system to the point where it's just going to explode.
So the way that I conceptualize this is your laser impacts and breaks off some chunks for you to, absorb or what have you, but through the rest of the actual...
And causes vibration.
Right. Through the rest of the thing, a shockwave goes to the other side and then comes back, essentially, and loses, some of its power every time. But the point is, if you don't monitor and properly predict or wait long enough between your blasts, then you could create a situation where the whole thing is breaking apart because you're lining up those shockwaves together over and over again.
Yeah.
And
so the inside of the asteroid is what's called damped oscillatory motion. So each time the wave goes through, it starts to, the amplitude starts to go down a little bit, but the frequency will always stay the same. So even if the frequencies are the same, but the amplitudes are going down and down and down, each time you add one to it, it adds up in terms of the amplitude really, really quickly.
This is a really, really cool concept even, actually. If you search on YouTube for damped oscillatory motion, there are people who demonstrate it with strings. They'll just vibrate a string around, and you can start seeing exactly how these things add up and how it bounces and works and all that. It's very intuitive when you see it. But again, it's very high science. And
a YouTube video of the Tacoma Bridge.
Yes,
oh, yes.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a local one
example.
For us here. That's yeah.
So the Tacoma Bridge,
Gallopin' Gertie.
If people haven't seen it,
Yeah.
it was just the waves of the wind as it was going past, because the wind was coming down in these regular, very common gusts. That's what happens.
Yep.
Bridges aren't meant to do that.
No.
Lone car left on span. This could be you.
Yeah. So this particularly happened due to the shape of the bridge. Basically,
Not even the shape.
the wind to impact it in
Just
the wrong way.
the makeup and the structural, I guess it's the internal shape of the bridge. The position of the bars that were keeping it up, the cross bars in the middle of the bridge, it was terribly, terribly designed because no one took into account this pulsed sort of action of the wind as it came down the valley.
Yeah, it's right over the Tacoma Narrows, which is a very small gap in Puget Sound, and the wind comes from both sides of the Olympic Peninsula, the south and the north, and has a convergence point roughly in that area. So it comes blasting through that part of the sound, and you end up with this. Even the current narrow bridge, actually, the new one they've built, there's some pretty scary moments up there if you're in the wind where your car gets rocked around. You can see how this bridge would start moving, and then it's all over.
Yeah, so this is an example to tie it back to what we were talking about is the wind hits it, and gives it just a little bit of a nudge. And then when it hits it again, it hits it at exactly the spot, like you were talking about with the swing set, where it would continue the same motion over and over again, instead of like dampening it or forcing it in the other direction. That is really interesting.
It.
I think oh yeah, here we get the final image. For those of you that haven't seen it, it's pretty famous footage of the bridge finally collapsing.
Total collapse.
Although I don't remember. Oh, there it is. Ugh. Twisted itself right into wreckage. Somebody probably went to jail for that. I assume. Or at least got fired. Somebody had to have gotten canned. Anyway.
Well, it's the US. Someone got sued at least.
Yes, that's how we do it here. So, yeah, I mean, we've got all these... So now, how many different roles do they actually put here? Because they've also talked about how, depending on the size of the mining ship, these might all be one person, right? Like you were talking about, Gray. There was a single-seat mining starter ship that was a potential option for one of the...
Yeah. And that's going to make this very interesting. It suggests that not only will profitability increase when you start having these larger ships, but it also suggests that the ability to do larger tasks will scale with the number of chairs, which is something that we've kind of suspected, but I don't think I've ever seen confirmed this solidly. If the Terrapin had one seat, and only one seat, that means you are going to have to be the person that pilots around the asteroids and gets into a safe spot so you don't get hit. It means you are the person who has to launch that missile and figure out the exact angle and everything else with that. And you are the person who's going to have to handle breaking things apart. And you're the person who's going to have to handle tractor beaming them together. It's a lot of work. And it suggests that for the mining profession, you're going to have to get bigger ships. And they're going to have to provide things that are 2 or 3 seaters that are smaller to really have the introduction to the thing. Because the Orion's not going to be the only ship that they ever make for this.
No, it's huge.
And that really excites me.
The
that
Orion's
really
the kind of
excites me
thing
to
that
see the
an organization buys to have one of for their mining crews. You know, that looks so big.
They've also said as well that you don't need a specific ship for any of these tasks. There's nothing stopping you taking a gladiator out and putting mining lasers on the turrets, or
and
mining lasers on the front
scanners.
and tractor beams on the turrets. Like, they've openly said that this is something that you can do yourself. You don't need to wait for a variant. You can just make your own variants. This is the whole point of the modularity component of the game.
It's true. And maybe these mining lasers are something you can easily mount on the front of a constellation. You might not have a grinder, but you might have sufficient lasers to do this, and then a collector or whatever you're looking to do. It's true. You might have the ability to do a whole lot of interesting modularity with this.
It does say that the Orion itself is a 6-crew ship. And that so that implies that they're gonna, you break up the actual roles that they have listed here, and I think there's something like 9 roles, but that goes to like 6 different people. So let me see if I can find how that might. I mean, you might have the pilot, might also be the scan operator. The beam operators might be separate, but the exothermic reaction detector and the laser seismologer, he might just, one person like the safety officer runs both of those programs on his console. The materials processor and the cargo operator might sort of be the same thing. The refinery guy might be a separate guy. That's all. Man, that just sounds really cool. It's incredible how they've created something. I never would have guessed, really, that you could create something that feels so as cool as what is it? Damn it now, Guns of Icarus. That feels as cool as Guns of Icarus.
Yes.
Yeah.
For this like multiplayer co-op work on a single ship for mining. Because I guess the only other example you ever had is World of Warcraft with a freaking pickaxe, or EVE Online with just sitting there with lasers reading a book.
And honestly, the work that they've put into the mining deep dive, it just makes me even more excited about the salvage mechanics that are coming up. Because salvage is going to be my big draw for the game. And the idea of having to have several different people all working together just to figure out how to get a ship apart, or like which components are worthwhile, or how this is going to be done, I think it's going to be super, super interesting.
Yeah, and we all know that salvage is the most noble of causes. We know this because the first time we see Serenity in action in the Firefly series, she's salvaging some cargo from a derelict ship. That's how we know.
Absolutely.
Speaking of that, did you guys, and this is something that I think everybody else might want to check. Vin posted a link to this. Let me see if I can find it. The Black. Did you guys listen to this?
Which one was that?
This is a short story that was read by someone named Bad News Baron. The short story is by Nekara. It's a 5-minute long audio story that was on SoundCloud.
Read by Bad News Baron.
I'll put this in the show notes.
Life shook uncontrollably.
It's really interesting.
They all
It's
said
about
it
an
was easy
explorer.
once
I don't want to
it
give it away, but I definitely recommend if you're just sitting there bored, listening, working, or something to do. I'm putting this right at the bottom of the show notes. Check it out. It's really cool. It's called The Black. It's a small short story, and I thought it was great. It's very, very depressing, but it's great nonetheless. It's scary as hell, man. It is so... Oh. In the same way Gravity is. Like, I just... Oh, man. I do not want to be put in that situation. No thank you, sir.
We'll have to make sure that I listen to that for next week. I'd actually seen the link, but I hadn't gone through it yet.
It's very cool. It's only 5 minutes, but it's a great little story, and it does work really well in the Star Citizen universe. All right, so I think that is about to do it for today. I opened up the wrong orange-based program. Here we go. Yeah, I opened
Orange-based programs?
Well, listen, I've got one thing that's an MP3 tag program, another one that's Winamp. One's an orange lightning, the other one's an orange checkbox. They all look the same to me.
Oh, it's not powered by oranges.
No, not exactly. All right. So remember, for next week, we are going to, well, for some episode in the future, we're going to be talking about the Lost Generation, which is, I think, a considerably better story than what we just talked about today, Cassandra's Tears. And I think it might even be better than Kid Crimson, honestly. The Lost Generation is essentially a retelling of a Lara Croft / Indiana Jones style character. It's sort of an archaeological mystery of what happened to the very first colony ship that humanity sent off into the world in Star Citizen. This was a slower than light colony ship that was supposed to send, some 5,000, I think, colonists in sort of a deep cryogenic sleep to a planet, and it disappeared and nobody ever knew what happened to it. So this story is of someone trying to unravel that mystery and find out for the first time what happened to it, and it's really cool. And I hope they have another one in this series, because it's not, unfortunately, wrapped up by the end.
Yes, definitely suggests there's a lot more where that came from. Even if it's just in the universe, there's going to be a lot of content to come from the story, and it is really well done.
Yeah, it's very well told. I liked it a lot. I hope you guys will. Check it out, read it for sometime in either next episode or the one after that. And we will see you in 2 weeks on the 8th of March. And hopefully, we'll be one step closer to Arena Commander 1.1, and we'll talk to you then. See you guys. Bridger signing off. I love that lone trumpet at the end. So cool. All right. Whew. That was a long one.
It appears my fantasy League of Legends team won its match this week.
Ooh, I gotta check out mine. Let's see.
I have a team named Fake Sports.
Damn it! I lost by 7.
Ooh. Let me guess. The other person had that TSM AD carry.
No, they had a TSM mid though.
Ah.
I lost by 10, and 2 of their players haven't even finished playing yet. Damn it all.
Ouch. Yeah,
I think I've lost every match for fucking...
Apparently Wild Turtle went 19-5-5 with 697 creep kills, 1 quadra kill, and 1 pentakill.
I just have some really inconsistent players. They can't all find a single week to do well on. And Teams Elements was doing amazing the first 2 weeks. They've shit on me the last couple of weeks.
That's because it's Elements.
Is it? That's
My apologies to any Elements players who might be listening.
Oh, man. Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I never really got into the LoL esports scene until we decided to do the fantasy LCS. It gives you a stake in it, right? There's no like geographic home team to root for. Like I can't go, yeah, go Northeastern Cloud9. Like that, they don't have that. So you have to kind of pick a team and have something set on it. Unfortunately, I don't think I'm doing very well. Let's see the stats of the league here. Let's see. Leave standings. Somebody on our team won 3. I have lost 3. I am the only person that has lost 3. Ugh. Ugh. Sigh. Oh, well. I don't know. You don't play League, I don't think, Tim, do you?
No.
No.
He doesn't hate himself that much. It's okay.
Oh, I do, but in different ways.
Oh, okay.
You're a Dota 2 man, aren't you?
And I cure it by 9 in the morning alcohol.
Oh. Well, it's okay. It's night here,
In
so.
the morning.
It's always... Is that what it's literally called?
Oh.
Sorry?
Is that what the alcohol's actual brand name is?
No, it's called Hop Hog.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
Well, that's interesting.
I like it.
I'm kidding. That was actually last night's alcohol that I haven't cleaned up.
Okay.
9 in the morning alcohol is usually reserved for Thursdays.
I see. Well, like I said, it's always nighttime
it.
somewhere. All right, guys, we're gonna sign off here. I probably have to be at work early tomorrow. I have to go look at my calendar. All right. Have a good night, everybody.
Whereas I have to go to work.
Night, folks. Thanks for watching.